Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of COVID update webinars. We're very lucky this week to have a couple of special guests to talk about pharmacy and looking at medicines and some of the issues that have been presented for getting medicines to patients and some of the ways that those are being overcome. We are joined this week by Sam O'Connell, who is a clinical pharmacist at a practice in Newcastle, and Johnathan Laird, who is a prescribing pharmacist from Scotland and the founder of Pharmacy and Practice. I think it's one of the smileiest panels we've got looking at those pictures. So again, don't want to give you too much of an introduction because I'm the least interesting person here. So Johnathan, great to have you with us. Just in our little chat we had just then, you used an interesting phrase which I'll let you introduce, but I just wanted you to kind of set the scene for everyone that's listening around what you've seen changed in the world of pharmacy, both personally and through all of your network over the last few weeks as a response to COVID.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Listen, thanks for having me on. It's a really interesting format, and hopefully I can bring some insights. Yeah, so yesterday I was talking to someone and they used the term Pharmageddon in relation to the activity that's just happened in community pharmacy particularly. So I think it can be summed up I mean, various sectors obviously in pharmacy have been affected in different ways, and the tsunami has hit in different ways across the piece. But I suppose the most acute phase of the uplift in activity happened in community pharmacy a few weeks ago, and I think that's where that term Pharmageddon comes from, to be honest. The drive and the uplift in demand was unprecedented in our living memory in terms of the volume of prescription medicines that were flowing through community pharmacy. I think in Scotland in March, community pharmacies, the reference for this figure is Community Pharmacy Scotland. Community pharmacies up there processed more NHS prescriptions in a month than they ever have before. And I think that sort of paints really the initial picture of what you need to know about how pharmacy, particularly community pharmacy, has been affected. And to be honest, it really raises some pretty significant questions in my mind around the supply chain, around why, you know, as diplomatically as I could put it, why were all those prescriptions produced? You know, why did, you know, arguably the panic sort of fed into the medical world there as well, and the proof of that panic is in the numbers of prescriptions that were produced. And of course, I can only imagine what pressure that put further up the supply chain. I mean, obviously, I'm slightly biased to the welfare of my community pharmacy colleagues, so they all did a sterling job. But I'm guessing that drive and demand will have caused problems up the tree. So to answer your question, that's really the top line impact at this initial phase. What's to come next is going to be very interesting, because certainly the tide has gone out in terms of volume in community pharmacy, and I'd actually be very keen to hear a bit more about what has been happening in GP practice in due course from Sam, but certainly right at the coalface, that's what's been happening.
Fantastic. And have there been specific things that the community pharmacists have had to do to respond to those challenges, or is it just chucking more time at the same problem?
Well, there's been a few challenges. I mean, this thing for everybody is unprecedented, isn't it? And it presents in different ways in different interfaces with the health service. I think the initial thought was volume. How on earth are we going to cope? Basically, how long is this going to last? How many prescriptions can a person actually need? That's the initial bit. There was safety concerns as well. So, you know, the PPE thing, you know, initially right back at in that first week, sort of, well, almost pre-lockdown really, there wasn't any sort of personal protection in community pharmacy. And I guess to answer your question, they had to kind of think on their feet, and so things like screens popped up. Initially, contractors were buying those themselves, and now as the weeks have gone on and the representative bodies have sort of got across and are supporting more effectively, things like stuff like there's more secure pathways for PPE, for example, to get to the coalface. Those are the two main things, really, to be honest, Tom.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. So Sam, we'll indulge Johnathan now and come to you to think about that bit in primary care. So what have you done and seen around changing clinical practice and getting the medicines to your patients?
So obviously we've seen the same sort of surge in requests for prescriptions and things like that, and my role has been very much to try and think of how we manage that and manage patient expectation sensibly. So I obviously can't answer for all GP practices, but certainly here we started with moving to repeat dispensing very early on at the end of February, the beginning of March, and started moving more towards that and proactively moving patients, and also sort of trying to be a little bit more policey almost in terms of, well, why are you asking for that inhaler that you've not had for several months? What's going on now? And using that opportunity for ad hoc reviews of asthma and things like that, helping support my practice with sort of looking rapidly at the evidence that was coming out and reacting to things that were happening. So there was a lot of things going around social media that asthma patients should have rescue packs. So we were getting a lot of requests for the COVID-19 pack, regardless of whether they were asthmatic or not. So sort of supporting the staff to look at that. We use EPS, electronic prescription service, quite a lot anyway. But this gave us a bit of an impetus to say, right, we're not printing any prescriptions at all. Nobody wants that piece of paper traveling between us. So it is all going electronic. You need to tell us where it's going to go. More recently, EPS4's just been released, so we're investigating how we utilise that and put that into place. Prescribing has to be a lot more pragmatic. So if you've got a patient with a new hypertension, you've got to think pragmatically about, do I want to bring this patient in to do bloods if I start them on an ACE inhibitor? Am I potentially putting them at risk? Or actually, can I use something else that's not technical, that doesn't follow the guidelines, but keeps them safe for this period of time, and then we can pick that up later on? So there's a lot more pragmatic shift in our prescribing and what we're doing, in terms of what we're doing, and a lot more telephone and video consultations with patients, and we're seeing a higher acceptance of managing their chronic diseases better themselves. So we can say to patients, look, blood pressure machines aren't expensive. If you could get one and you can measure it at home, then I can keep in touch with you and find out what it is we're doing. Or look at your peak flow meters, what is that doing? Look at different things that you can measure yourself, and then we can liaise with you and see what's going on. So there has been a lot of that. We've also been sort of very keen to stay in contact with all our community pharmacy colleagues, particularly around us. Our closest pharmacy, who's actually in the same building already, is one of the highest volume dispensers in England. So on top of that, so we were releasing our technician to go and help them with it. I think at one point they were reporting their EPS prescriptions, if they were to print them out, were reaching hip level on the pharmacist. So the volume, as Johnathan referred to, was massive. So we were releasing our staff where we could to go in and help them out, to help get on top of what was happening there with them as well.
So what part of the body would they normally come up to? Would they be normally knee or ankle or?
Certainly not hip level, not in a day.
Yeah.
You have at that level within a day. It would certainly be sort of lower than that.
Yeah. And it's something you both mentioned about this sort of surge of prescriptions, and how much of that do you think is driven by sort of the medical your medical colleagues, and how much of it is patient demand, patient requests, or is that hard to unpick that piece?
I don't mind. How about Sam? Have you any thoughts on that before I dive in?
I mean, from the point of view of our practice, I would probably say that it was mostly patient driven from our end, from what I was seeing through and seeing the requests for, can I have double because so that I don't have to go out? Can I have this so that in case it runs out, can I have more? I'd like to think, and I'm pretty sure my GP colleagues are fairly sensible with what they're doing, and they don't generally allow patients to stockpiles, so it wouldn't be any different right now.
Did you have a view on that, Johnny?
Sorry, say it again, Tom.
Did you have a view on that question?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I need to apologise for my daughter coming in the back there.
That's the one eventually, didn't it?
It wouldn't be a webinar without a child or a dog in it, would it? Anyway, yes, I do. I think going back to the previous conversation as well, I wanted to touch on the other part of my life is publishing and digital. I don't want to go into that too much, but one insight from that space that was mentioned earlier on the conversation is the move towards digital, which overnight has just blown away. I see it as blowing away the cobwebs. I think for years, lots of us have quite fancied not having to fly to London if we live in the north of the country. And when I say the north, I mean Aberdeen, not Birmingham. So all these sort of preconceived ideas about how we work and so on and so forth have really seeped into what we're doing in pharmacy as well. And it's sort of the wheat from the chaff in many ways, I think, without sort of being too blunt about it. There's not as many places to hide really around how you go about your work and your business, because communication is so easy. And I think the cultural shift off the back of that is really interesting from my other work on the magazine and Pharmacy in Practice as well as in practice. The drive and demand piece is really interesting, and I totally agree with what Sam has said. She's probably covered it better than I could. One thing I would say about what's happening in Scotland is Community Pharmacy Scotland up here they really are very good, very forward thinking. Harry McQuillan in particular is very engaged with his network of community pharmacists up here, and he's really trying to lead them forward. Now, one of the things that's changed overnight is potentially a role for community pharmacists to manage long-term prescriptions. And when I say manage, I don't mean like, oh, I think we should be doing this, or actually that's an overdose doctor, or what have you, the traditional sort of behind the scenes pharmacy role that we've taken on, and probably in my view not got credit for properly for years actually. But actually now that we're non-medical prescribers, we can manage that front end of the repeat medication thing. Now that ties into your question about demand, because I think Harry and all our colleagues up in Scotland believe that community pharmacists should be really in charge of that in many ways, and that we should be actively using our prescribing qualification to make sure things like that drive and demand don't happen, because we would feel it straight away because we're supplying as well. There's some concerns about the conflict of interest around prescribing and dispensing on the same premises, but to be honest, the audit trails are so robust these days. I don't think you could get away with any shenanigans in that space. So I don't think that argument holds water anymore. There's also precedent around that conflict of interest with the minor ailments scheme in Scotland, where you're supplying and dispensing on the, you're prescribing and advising and supplying on the same premises, and also dispensing. Doctors have been doing that for years as well. So I'm maybe sort of starting to work the solution to what your question was, but going back to what the original question was, yes, unfortunately, the general public are really, really easily scared. And there's no doubt we were all a wee bit scared in those few weeks. And to be honest, they panicked. My question to medical and pharmacy colleagues is, why was that panic not managed really effectively? And yeah, I think there's an opportunity for community pharmacy to help there. It was kind of like, I mean, if I'll just finish by saying this, at Christmas, Sam will be familiar with this. We're usually only shut in community pharmacy for a few days. You know, Christmas hasn't changed since I've been born. You know, it's still, you know, Christmas Day is still 25th and Boxing Day is the 22nd. So, you know, nothing's changed.
It's cancelled this year.
It's not a surprise. Well, it's not a surprise. But still, we get this huge uplift in prescriptions in December, and then the drought in January. So, yeah, there's something to think about there, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I think that whole piece plays into things we've heard in previous episodes around how different parts of the system are slightly, you know, they're kind of finding the function they should be performing. A lot of the kind of the barriers that have existed almost artificially have sort of been taken away in some respects. So I suppose picking up on that theme, Sam, of the changes that you've seen and implemented, what are the things that you'd like to keep? And of those, what are the risks and opportunities that they present?
Okay, I mean, there's a few different bits. Just to pick up slightly, if you don't mind, on a bit of what Johnny mentioned, you know, what's going on in community pharmacy in Scotland is fantastic, but then I'm not that far away in Newcastle, and there's like a massive gap between what's going on. My link for community pharmacist is a prescriber, but doesn't really have the opportunity to use it. We've tried various bits around to do it, and it's getting that, you know, we're all on the same island. We need to like come all in line a little bit as well with it. And I think part of that is sort of leading into what you asked of what I want to keep. I do want to keep repeat dispensing. Running off the searches of our workload on what we've been signing off, we've seen a demonstrable drop in the number of prescription requests that we're processing just in 1 month. And yes, some of that will be the surge, but when we compare it year on year, we can see the reductions coming down. But then I'm worried not only in terms of we need to think of when that comes back up for renewal again, how as a practice are we going to manage that, because we're going to have a big surge again on prescriptions running out. Will the patients tell us when they've got their last prescription? Will the pharmacies tell us? How do we handle changes, which we're hoping we've selected our patients carefully enough that there's not going to be massive loads, but life happens and changes are going to happen. But also from the point of view of, yes, we've used repeat dispensing for a long time for our weekly Medibox patients, using it for the monthly ones, not so much around here, and we've rapidly increased that volume. We've come across slight glitches with our clinicals, with our software, and with the patient online apps that patients can order their repeat dispensing on the online app, which we weren't expecting. So we're trying to manage that, but also from the point of view of how the pharmacy is going to be able to manage, have they got more robust systems in place to realise that big surge is going to repeat itself? Just 2 seconds. Sorry, my turn to apologise.
It's fine, I feel better now.
Well, I am at work. If I swing things around, that's
allowed. That's allowed.
I should have put a sign on outside, maybe. Do that. So there are some things that we're looking at how we manage that. I'm hoping that this patient self-sufficiency is going to continue as well, this much more engagement with their chronic disease and their chronic disease management, the managing themselves, getting advice from pharmacies, accepting advice over the phone of what they could do.
Just quickly on that, Sam, are you having different conversations or different interactions with the patients? Do they seem better informed? Yeah. Or they're asking different questions?
Although I'm sitting here in scrubs and in a clinical room, I'm not actually seeing patients face to face. All of my interactions are on the phone or on video or by photo. We can send them texts and they reply with a photo of the rash. Or I had one lovely lady yesterday. I asked her to check her blood pressure at home so that I could do a HRT review. And sent her a text for her to reply so that it would come straight to me and it didn't go through the realms of the central email address and then getting to me and things like that. She sent me the reply back with her blood pressure reading and a picture of her monitor to prove what she told me was right. It was just lovely. And one of our other pharmacists had sent a question recently on a text to a patient asking if they were happy with a certain change that they were suggesting, and the patient not only replied yes but sent a picture of themselves with their thumbs up to do it. So the acceptance and the use of the technology is really, it's massive and it's fantastic. And if you're talking to a patient and you're going, yes, okay, I could bring you into the cold site and ask a HCA to see you, but is it worth that risk of bringing you in? Or is it better for you to use your monitor that you've got at home and just take those readings, let me know what they are, and then we can have a discussion about what's going on. And patients are much more open to that on the whole. There's some things that we do have to consider. Sorry, did you want to ask?
No, go for it. I'm keen to add at the end, but I'm enjoying it. Keep going.
You looked as if you were on the edge there to ask a question. So one of the things we are dealing with is, the practice I work in is in a deprived area. So we're having to balance the use of technology with what our patients have available. So they may not have the latest iPhone or phone that can do calls and things like that. Or if they do, they may not have the data to be able to manage it. And obviously in lockdown, I'd hope we never get to the point where we're having a conversation with a patient using public Wi-Fi in a pub or something, but we obviously can't do that right now. So we're having to get that little bit of balance there in what we're doing. And again, touching a little bit on what Johnny said, we have put in place, as have everybody across the healthcare system, rapid changes really quickly. And now we've got this opportunity to look at what we have been doing as we think about reintroducing some of the services. And just because we traditionally did it one way doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it that way. We've got this brilliant opportunity now of almost a clean slate to start again. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come of that and what we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So quickly, Johnny, you just wanted to add something in response to that, and I've got one more question for you in a second.
Yeah, 100%. So it just, again, Sam's covered it better than I could, but I suppose just sort of superimposing what she said on my personal experience. So we're involved in a project where we're it's called Technical Care, and we're basically digitizing or trying to take what a pharmacist does into the digital world. Now, the point here is pre-COVID, lots of people were patting me on the head and saying, "Oh, Johnny, you're really clever. How did you manage to trademark that? This is a great idea." But actually, we don't want to play yet. Now, post-COVID, boom, different story. the world has changed overnight, and Sam's articulated that better than I could, as I say. But I say that on one hand, but sitting on my shoulders, my grandfather, who was a Presbyterian minister back in Ireland, and he always said, everything in moderation. And we need to watch that we don't go too far one way or the other. But I do very much agree with Sam that pre-COVID, I think the health service, I think we're all guilty of it in our own sort of working lives. There was stagnation, there was fat on the system, there was a lot of inaction or a lot of action and not doing very much in terms of outcomes. And what I like about this new world that Sam has really optimistically described is that it is a new start, and the wheat has been, to use that phrase again, sorted from the chaff. And if you're a pharmacist or a doctor, anybody who interacts with patients, if you want to shamelessly support patients, there's never been a better time. And suddenly the tools that you wanted to be on the table are now on the table for you to use. And I think that's really exciting, actually.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. We've got a couple of minutes left. And the question I wanted to ask you right at the outset, you mentioned about, demands on the supply chain and those sorts of things. So it was a question really about, of all the changes going on, how do you expect that to impact on suppliers of medicines? And well, that's the question really, I suppose.
So I think, I'm not, apologies if this is a plug, Tom, sorry, but technoceutical care, we're pitching that as the weatherman of the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of that protection of the supply chain is, on one hand, what I've said before, involving community pharmacists and giving them more autonomy, but also understanding what happens to the medicine after it leaves the dispensing bench. I'll give you one quick example. In the DOAC market, there's a rush towards the DOACs and off warfarin. I'm not sure if Sam's seen this. The data that the NHS gets, as I'm sure many of your audience will be very familiar with, is 3 months old. We need patients telling us what's happening. We need them to be able to tell us what they're ordering and when, so that we can forecast using a statistically significant sample across the UK or world or whatever patch it's on, to let us protect the supply chain, really. And I think, if you're asking me where it should go, that's where I think it should go. And I think there'll be more players than us in that space. But it's very interesting. It's all about supply chain now. Yeah,
fantastic. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So Sam, have you got any final comments in terms of sort of looking forward and what you think the implications of everything that's changing might be on pharmacy and prescribing?
I think another sort of a part of what has come out of this is sort of increased acceptance of the different roles within healthcare. So I've been in this position, I've been here for quite a long time, so the majority of patients around here know me or quite scarily have heard of me. So but they're a bit more open to sort of me ringing and going, oh no, you contacted us because you had a query about your asthma, your eczema, your tablets or whatever. How can I help you? What's going on? And we're getting a little bit less of the, well, I want to speak to a GP. They're more taken from a pharmacist, prescriber, RANPs, our paramedic, and taking a bit more from there, really. The joined up working as well. Everybody's pulling together in the same direction. So whereas before, as a practice, we might say we're going to do this one thing, and I've always been quite open in terms of I'll share whatever work I do that's going to be of use for anybody else. We're much more open about it. So
thank you very much, Sam. I'm afraid we've just run out of time. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you both for your engagement today, and thank you to everyone at home. I'm sure you're probably all at home for listening. Next week we're going to be looking at innovation through COVID times. across all sorts of different areas, the good, the bad and the ugly of innovation, so what's good and what's not. Beyond that, we'll be looking at some more sort of the strategic medicines management and procurement areas, and then looking at how the NHS is going to start preparing to get back to business as usual. If you've got any things that you'd like to see in future episodes, please get in touch with us, NHS Insights at mtechaccess.co.uk. And next week's episode is going to be on Thursday instead of Friday because of the bank holiday. So thanks again for listening, everybody. Thanks again to Sam and Johnathan, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.